Hi, I'm Michael Killen. We all pay taxes for water, for people to remove the garbage, the refuge, and some other services that help us all in our communities live a comfortable life. I have decided to invite the Assistant Director of Public Works of the City of Palo Alto to come on this program. I want to ask him a series of questions about several issues that are important to all of us. He is Phil Bobel. Phil, thank you for coming on this show. And so you're the Assistant Director of Public Works of that powerful city, Palo Alto.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me.
And before I ask a couple of questions about your background, am I correct, you work in a city where there's always this goal of being a leader?
Right. We believe we are leaders in almost every area. Not the leader nationwide, sometimes the state, sometimes locally, but that's our goal, is to help push out the envelope.
Yes, and I've met officials from other cities in Silicon Valley, San Mateo, and other places, and sooner or later somebody always said, well, that's Palo Alto. You know, they always have to be at the edge. Good. And a little background, how long have you worked at the city of Palo Alto?
28 years.
28 years, that's quite a long time. You've obviously have a lot of accomplishments and you've learned a lot. So I get to ask you a whole lot of questions.
Please.
I have become fascinated with waste management. And I was wondering if you could tell us maybe a little bit about it, what's involved in waste management, and then I'm going to come and ask you, what are the three most important aspects or goals a city like Palo Alto is pursuing in the context of waste management? So maybe give us a little picture and then I'll start asking my questions, a little picture of waste management.
Well, probably the most important thing to try to focus on at first is that we don't call it waste management anymore, right? It's zero waste, which goes along with our overarching goal to not have waste, but to reuse everything.
Yeah, that's Palo Alto already.
Yeah.
Waste management isn't enough. It's got to be zero waste.
It's zero. It's zero waste. That's our goal.
All right.
And we're actually made a lot of progress toward it.
Oh,
so we've divided it into kind of three areas. You can compost certain things, organics. So we want to compost as much stuff as we can, the organics. We want to recycle as much stuff as we can. You know, the old-fashioned recycling was bottles and cans. Now we're doing batteries and all kinds of things. And then we hope that the third category gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's the black can that we send off to the landfill. So the goal is to reduce that as much as humanly possible and get everything in either the blue recycling can or the green compost can.
Okay, so you presented three topics, right? Three aspects of waste management. And I think the first one you said is recycling. And how's that going?
Palo Alto, again, is in a leadership role. We've got great participation. We've got a clientele that really wants to do the right thing. So we're kind of blessed with a very educated community that understands. But even so, there's a lot of material that ends up in the black can. That is, not everybody is separating everything by a long shot. So we've got a ways to go.
I was at a dinner party the other night, and one of the guests, I told them I was going to do an interview on waste management, zero waste, and with you, and we focused on recycling. And he and his wife both are very progressive people, very educated, and they said, you know, we really cannot keep it straight in our heads. If this goes here, this goes there, and this goes there. And is that something you experience with other?
It's a very common complaint. I feel strongly that we ought to be trying to simplify this. I keep trying to get our group to simplify it so that the messages are clear, simple. People can quickly know which container to put it in. We're not there yet. It's still more complicated than I want it to be.
Do you have a program to keep furthering the education of the public?
Definitely. I mean, we have our website, we have these mailers, we have stuff we stick in the Palo Alto Weekly, we've got all kinds of methods, the social media outlets. We're using all those techniques to try to, but unfortunately, as you point out, our message is kind of complicated, and we need to simplify it.
Why is it complicated?
Well, because these man-made things are complicated. Let's take a container that your soup stock comes in. It's got a metal liner, then it's got paper, and then it's got wax on the outside. So in our wisdom, we've put materials together in something that are hard to separate. So how do you recycle something that's made up of multiple materials? That's a fundamental problem. So we have to kind of decide, well, can we just recycle this anyway, even though it's not perfect? And we go back and forth on these kind of decisions.
Okay. Now, do you have outreach programs where you have a few employees who are putting on little group sessions on this block or that block? I think your city does that to some extent with energy.
Yeah.
But
and we do it too with the Zero Waste program. We're happy to respond to any request from any group to put a little demonstration on, bring out the things, show them which container. It can be fairly entertaining and fun, and so we have a good time with that. The other thing we have is these Zero Waste block leaders. So we have about 25 block leaders where they've become the little experts, and they do that same thing.
Oh, they meet with their neighbors,
Yeah.
have little groups, and
Yeah.
yeah, because my wife and I, we sort everything. We do our best.
Thank you.
I'm baffled sometimes. Does it go in the blue? Does it go in the green? Does it go in the black?
Yeah. And there's a movement. San Jose is trying an experiment right now with their commercial people, not their residential people. And they're saying, look, there's just two kinds of things. They're either wet or they're dry. And they call this a wet-dry system. If it's wet, put it in this container, commercial businesses. And if it's dry, put it in this container. It'll be mostly recyclable, the dry stuff, and the other stuff will be mostly compostable. So that's an experiment, and different communities are trying experiments like that. So the dust hasn't all settled on that. We're not sure what is the ideal program of the future.
Is wet primarily organic material, food?
Right. Food and wet paper towels from the kitchen.
Animal waste?
That's where they're kind of caught, and that's why they're just for the moment doing it with the commercial program, is because things like pet waste, diapers, which pretty much just come from the residential sector, female hygiene products, these things are still a dilemma for us. We don't have a good solution. Most compost operators don't want it in the compost, and so we don't have a good solution for that yet.
Okay, now I go for a walk every morning for the most part. And I also want to say with my wife, and we pick up litter.
Good for you.
Later, maybe off camera, I have a street where I would appreciate, or it would be good for the city to do some work. But I also see these multi-dwelling buildings, and I see these big things outside, I forget what you call them, and I can tell the people who live in these buildings are having a difficult time recycling and trying to meet your needs. And what first of all, do you agree with that?
It is a struggle. We've identified that as one of the key things we need to work on. We need to work on both the property managers, the people that are supposed to put these containers out and tell the residents what to do, and then the residents themselves who in a big building might not understand what to do or might not be paying attention. So it is definitely the key to our future is figuring out how to sort of organize these multi-unit complexes.
Yeah. So it seems there's two outreaches, one to the building management and the other is to the actual people who live in the building.
Exactly.
It's not easy to reach the building management, more difficult to reach.
Well, especially if we don't have a real cooperative building manager, because we need them to also do some outreach and them to point out when the residents aren't doing it right. And some of them do, some of them don't.
Is there any financial incentive for the building managers to cooperate and work a little harder at this?
So far, we've not penalized or even proposed to penalize people that are really residents. We have recently adopted an ordinance for businesses and institutions to actually first go through a long outreach program with them, but then in the end, if they're still not separating correctly, to actually have a series of fines for the commercial sector. We've not gone that path for the residential sector.
And then we have these restaurants all over the place, and they're generating a lot of waste. You have any special programs for them?
We do. The big thing that they weren't doing a few years ago was composting at all. All of their food waste, wet material, was just going in the garbage. And so as of a couple of years ago, we started a program, starting with the big facilities and starting with the restaurants, of requiring that they have the compost service, that they have a green bin. And now we're at the stage of, okay, pretty much everybody's got a green bin. Now let's make sure you're putting the right stuff in the green bin. So it's a long-ish outreach program, but we are making good progress there. We've gone to a situation where almost all the restaurants are really taking this seriously now.
So a moment ago, we spoke about multi-dwelling buildings, and I was thinking in the context mostly of residents and buildings that are there. But I see buildings going up everywhere. Mm-hmm. Multi-story buildings. These are, to a good extent, for corporations, maybe for some housing. But do you have any plans to impose building codes that would make it easy for people on every floor to recycle?
You and I have talked about this before, the possibility of having a chute system like they did in the old days, and having multiple chutes for recyclables, garbage, and compost material. We don't have it on our list of things to do to have a new ordinance actually requiring that type of thing. But it may be in our future.
Okay. And then you have landfills, right?
Well, the city's landfill is closed, but our material goes to some of our material, less and less, mercifully, is going to a landfill in south of San Jose.
Okay. And I could be incorrect, but I think I saw a note, or maybe you told me, that the state has a goal of diverting 75% of what all the cities in Palo Alto are sending to the landfill. They want it diverted. In other words, I believe they want less or fewer things going into those landfills. Why?
A couple of good reasons, and we want it too, by the way. And good memory, 75% is the right number. That's their goal, and we've already met their goal. We're at 82%, and that means 82% of the stuff that used to go in landfills is now getting basically recycled or composted. So the reason we don't want it in landfills is two big reasons. First, that a couple decades ago, it looked like we were going to fill up the country with piles of garbage everywhere, and everybody became alarmed at the size of these landfills. So part of it's just a land use question of not wanting to devote so much land to landfills. And then the other part of it is wasting materials. Why dig up iron ore that's only got 2%, 3% iron in it when we could have something that's almost pure iron, and here we are throwing it in a landfill? So there's a materials aspect, and I guess there's three reasons. And the third and more recent one is that greenhouse gases, when you put organic material in the landfill, it breaks down, creates methane. methane has a multiplier 25 times as high as carbon dioxide as far as a greenhouse gas contribution. So we want to decrease the amount of that methane that's produced in landfills.
I'm going to try to summarize, but I may not be able to do this. So recycling has a lot of benefits, okay, and I know it's now getting more difficult to resell the metals, maybe cardboard, I think I've learned from you, is still something, okay. So recycling is important, and reducing the amount of stuff that goes into the landfill for a few reasons. We don't want to use the land for that, and the cradle to grave, you know, use that metal over again. But then you brought up methane, and is methane, reducing the methane emissions, is that's fits under the state's plan of trying to reduce greenhouse gases?
It does, it does. And the state would say all three of those reasons you just mentioned are reasons for reducing.
Okay, look, I looked at your website and it said under Public Works is water. You folks have some goals, and when I looked at that, I said to myself, water, oh, you're only concerned with the quality of water that we drink. But would you put the scope of what you and your folks are concerned with respect to water?
Sure. Let me try, because things are kind of changing rapidly. We're realizing that water can have different qualities for different uses, and we ought to be tailoring the water we use for a particular use. So here we take Hetch Hetchy water, 250 miles away, one of the world's highest quality. Well, we shouldn't use that to really flush toilets with, right? So that should be our drinking water. And then a lesser quality can be used for irrigation. A lesser quality yet could be used to flush toilets. And there's a whole range like that. So we should be targeting the quality of the water with its use. And this whole concept is called the one water approach now, is the new buzzword. One water, meaning you ought to think about all the sources of water you have as your sources, not just our old-fashioned water supply.
So you have zero waste, and now you folks in Palo Alto have one water. But is that a nationally accepted term?
It's becoming, you'll hear it, yes. We didn't invent it in Palo Alto.
Okay. So now matching the incoming water to the particular need. Now I think in my own house, I would have to have a new set of pipes put in, so gray water maybe comes in for the flushing of the toilets, or for my wife has a lovely garden. So I want to ask, what about building codes?
Yeah.
Is there a movement to, when somebody sells a house in Palo, the new buyer must upgrade? What's the status?
Well, we haven't gotten to the houses yet. We've started with the commercial sector, and not on just change of ownership, but if it's being rebuilt or built from scratch, then there are some building code requirements that kick in. And it basically says you have to dual plumb, because it's the exact problem you just mentioned, of you'd need separate plumbing systems if you're going to have multiple qualities of water and multiple uses. So we've said for commercial buildings, big ones, you have to put in this dual plumbing system when something's constructed for new or it's a major remodel. But we haven't done that for houses yet, but I think this whole thing is coming.
And I'm just going to go off on a tangent for a second. I know you know Pat Burt, who's been a mayor several times and on the council. He told me, I think, that you folks are very concerned with the burning of natural gas, which is cleaner than coal, of course, than petroleum, but it's still dirty, okay? And I think he told me your city was working to change the building codes so it would encourage people to use more electricity than gas. Is that in your area? Is that something that rings true?
I'd stop short of saying we're in the process of changing the building codes. What we're doing is coming up with ways of encouraging people to switch from electric to gas. A lot of people, though, are sort of married to their gas stoves, and it's not going to be popular to take all types of gas appliances and convert them to electricity. Why we want people to head in that direction, though, is that Palo Alto now has an electric supply that's basically 100% renewable. So it's not producing CO2. And if we could convert people to that non-CO2 electricity, we'd go a long way to meeting these greenhouse gas goals. Because as you point out, although natural gas is cleaner than a lot of energy forms, it's still, those organic molecules are still getting converted to CO2 in the end, right? So we're still producing CO2 when we burn or otherwise combust natural gas. So we are trying to incentivize a switch to electricity, but we're not mandating it with building codes yet.
Okay, I'd like to go back to the water for a second. The first section of our interview, we talked about waste management, and you have this zero waste management goal. What about water? And do you have goals that you've already set for matching up the source with the needs?
It's a little trickier with water, and we're still searching for a metric that would capture this matching that I talked about, right? It's hard to, we haven't developed a good metric for that matching yet. What we have said is, as you know, and as people realize, is that when we're in a drought period, or even when we're not, we've got a goal of reducing our drinking water, our highest quality water, by a certain amount, right? We had a goal of, I believe it was 24% at the, in the 5th year of the drought, for example.
So that's energy efficiency.
I'd call it water efficiency.
Water. Oh,
yeah.
That's right. I meant to say efficiency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the key to improving the efficiency of water usage?
Well, the biggest use is irrigation in Palo Alto. You know, roughly half of the water that comes to your house and you use is used outside the house on landscape. And so one thing we're really big on is trying to take our sewage treatment plant and can sort of upgrade it a little bit further. It doesn't require much upgrading, and produce a quality of water that would be great for irrigation. And then we could, if we could put this distribution system in place, which is expensive, and that's a constraint, but if we could get it distributed to the houses, then we could get a 50% reduction approximately in the drinking water that's used, the stuff that's used on landscape irrigation currently.
So landscape is 50% of the water use in the city of Palo Alto.
Roughly, yeah.
And you're trying to get a different source to meet that need, which of course means piping at every level.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the big constraint.
What about using costs, raising the price? Do you have a rising scale on the volume of water that people use?
Well, as you probably know from living here, the cost of water is going up. We're not just raising it to incentivize people, but the San Francisco is spending literally billions of dollars redoing our water supply system, and the cost of water is going up. So without us tinkering with that price increase, it's happening anyway.
Okay. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I just want to say Palo Alto wants to be the leader, and is, I know, a leader in a lot of things. We have Palo Alto. In terms of waste management, how does it compare, do you think, to San Francisco?
San Francisco is pretty comparable. If you use this metric I talked about a percentage that you've gotten out of the landfill, San Francisco and Palo Alto are pretty much the same. We've both met the state goal, and we're both sort of at the top of the heap.
What about San Jose?
San Jose is a little further behind, but doing well also.
Okay, Menlo Park?
You know, I don't know about Menlo Park.
How
Sorry.
about the rest of the nation as a whole?
The rest of
that's
the nation
hard.
is definitely lagging. Lagging, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now you're going to go back to work tomorrow or the next day or so. What are you specifically going to concentrate on that's really meaningful to the consumers and in this city of Palo Alto?
Well, I'll throw out two things that tie to what we've been talking about. One is a little better treatment at the sewage treatment plant of our water to remove more salt from the system so that we can use it in more irrigation applications.
Right.
And that's one thing that I'm personally sort of championing is getting that next level of treatment at our sewage treatment plant, removing salt, increasing the ability to use that water for irrigation. The second thing I'd point to in the zero waste area that we haven't talked really about is there's still a lot of unused material, let's call it waste, from construction and from demolition. We call this construction and demolition waste. It still makes up roughly half of what's going to the landfill. And so that's the next big area we have to make a more serious dent in. And we're working on that.
So getting salt out of the waste, and that's your plant near Bixby Park?
Right.
And the other one is, help me with it?
The construction and demolition waste?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So that's completely different. That's not a water thing. That's a, let's call it a waste thing. That's a second major area that I'm personally sort of
Okay.
focused on.
Well, we're going to wrap things up. And I want to say, I think it's wonderful we have people like you in the Public Works Department of the great city of Palo Alto, because I think it's good for all of us. And I know your city, as well as this state, likes to be a leader to try to influence other cities, other states, other countries to learn from what you are doing. My guest has been Phil Bobel. I am Michael Killen.
Thank you, Brad.